What's going on, Next Gen fam? Welcome back to Mentor Momentum with Next Gen HQ. Thank you so much for joining us again this week, and I promise you're in for an absolute treat. We got to sit down with Mita Mallick, the head of inclusion, equity, and impact at Carta. So many takeaways in this episode that you can expect, all the way from the importance of doing things while you're afraid and being able to dive into fear and not let fear overcome you. Mita also talks about the buying power of the multicultural consumer and what brands and entrepreneurs can learn about this space. And finally, we finish up with the importance of working smart and not hard and being able to deeply think about a problem rather than just diving in to whatever is assigned to you. So there is so many takeaways that you can expect. It's a jam-packed episode, so make sure you got your pen and your paper. This is a watch once, if not twice, but beyond excited for you to check out this episode of Mentor Momentum featuring Mita Mallick. Starting kind of right at the beginning of your career, when you look back on that, 20-year-old version of yourself coming out of school, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, everybody's like the world is your oyster. When you look back on that version of yourself, what is one piece of advice that you would give?
And the biggest piece of advice I would give my 20-year-old self is to do it afraid. I think I spent a lot of my life being afraid of what people would think, if I would make mistakes, if that's too risky. And so really jumping into things and giving it my all and not being scared. And I think I don't regret any of my career choices, but most of my career has been big company, large public companies. And I was really excited to join Carta for that reason, for the reason of the purpose, as you stated, on what we do, but also because you get to write the story with them, which is really exciting. And so thinking about less about what I think people expected of me, but think about like what I want to do.
And obviously you're hugely passionate for storytelling. You contribute to 2 publications, including Entrepreneur, which, is super relevant for our audience. In that writing experience, that storytelling experience, has there ever been a moment where, you were afraid to press send, afraid to press go on something that you created and then overcame that to actually share it with the world? When I think of our audience, they're writing books, creating podcasts, launching new visions and companies. And I can get that it could be daunting to put something out into the world. It's much easier to work on it, siloed in your own little space. So if there's a story or a moment you remember where you were able to actually push that button and overcome that fear.
What I advise everyone to remember is that our stories are constantly changing and we're always rewriting our stories, especially with everything that happened last year. And there are some parts of our stories that are scary, that we're not ready to tell because we are still healing from it. Yeah. And one of my big parts of my story that I've been talking about more and more, and I feel like there's a responsibility to do that, is that I grew up as one of 3 families of color outside of Boston. My younger brother and I, we were the proud kids of Indian immigrant parents and still are. And I was bullied a lot, heavily and physically growing up. And one of the moments that I share pretty openly now, that it was when I was a freshman taking intro to physical science. I was so excited to take that class, and there was a lab component in that. And I had 2 white boys who had been bullying me for some time in that class. And on one day it escalated to when they decided to set my hair on fire in chem class. And my hair was down to my knees then. And so they were lighting matches and throwing them into my hair. And my lab partner, who had never spoken to me in my life during that, 6 weeks of the class, was like, "Oh my God, your hair is on fire." And so that's a moment that I share pretty openly, and there are other moments, but I share that for a few reasons. One, because I have healed from that. And because of that experience, I feel that it's so important to be advocates and speak out for others, especially when you see people who are being bullied. But also that was the day when I had an advocate stand up for me, which was the guidance counselor, who was also the track coach. And while I'm not coordinated, I can run fast. And he saw that in me. And and I wasn't very willing, but he put me into both track and cross country. And sports was my saving grace, because when you're on a field and when you're with other people, all of a sudden they see your ability and they see you as equal. So I share that pretty openly right now because I think it's important that when you share stories like that, you actually are able to take your voice back that others took from you. But when I share that story, I know other people feel empowered to share their own story, and it can be really healing.
In your experience, is there an example of when ignoring diverse viewpoints or neglecting diverse representation negatively affected a brand? And on the other side, is there an opportunity where it actually positively impacted, as we dive into more of this storytelling concept? And I think, we're on this really incredible thread, looking at it from, your work perspective as well, and seeing, where maybe ignoring has negatively impacted, and where accepting and sharing has really positively impacted a brand.
I love this question, because no longer can we separate diversity, equity, inclusion and just think it's about workforce. It's really about workforce. It has to start there, but it's also about how the question points out, how do your brands and products and services show up in the marketplace? And so unfortunately, we have seen many many brands make mistakes, and some of them deemed racist, right? We would just call them. And whether that's, we could just Google them right now, whether that's Prada or Gucci, it's Bees, who had a recent incident, Macy's, there's a lot. And so what I would say there, it is an ecosystem. It's not just about the people who are working internally on the marketing, but also thinking about, who do you choose to partner with, right? Who are your thought leaders and your partners within your ecosystem? Because it's okay to start and say, I care about Black Lives Matters. Like, as a leader, I care about this. And also, I acknowledge that on my Instagram feed, I don't have any Black talent. So I need to start somewhere, and I need help, right? So I think people have to be really vocal and start there. I also would say, it is, if you are sitting right now, what year is it? 2021? I'm losing count. 2021. Nielsen's recent data, and this doesn't capture, of course, all of it, over $3.1 trillion of buying power for the multicultural consumer.
Wow.
That is a lot of money to be made. And you are neglecting that base. So if you don't have a strategy right now for Black, African American, Latinx, Hispanic, Asian American, if you aren't thinking about how you're reaching these communities now, I don't know if you're going to be in business in 10 years. So I think that if you look at the data and you think about how you want your brand to show up intentionally and how you want to authentically serve these communities, we have to start thinking about this. We have to get on it now. I think Sephora is a great example. I really admire Sephora. Now they're on their journey, so let's see where we are a year from now. But a year ago, you probably remember in the headlines, they were accused by their shoppers of racist encounters and racist incidents. And a year later, pretty amazing, the things that they're doing in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion roles, training, scaling back third force security parties, thinking about how do you upskill the individuals that are in the Sephora stores who are actually helping me understanding my skin needs, my hair needs, and then also doubling the representation of Black-owned beauty products in their store. And also they did, if you do the research, a massive study over the last year. And from that study, they're gaining insight. So that is what I think, organizations are made of people, and people make mistakes, and organizations make mistakes. And it is about being vulnerable. And, I always joke with my husband, it's like, if you're going to apologize to me, give me the real apology. Not that I'm sorry you feel that way, but I am sorry for X, Y, and Z. And that's what consumers are demanding of brands. I'm sorry for X, Y, and Z. And now what I do next matters. And let me show you that I am sorry for what I did. And I'm going to prove to you that I'm going to continue to do better.
On that thread of, kind of learning from past mistakes, being able to grow. One question we love to ask all of our mentors is there a time in your career that you perhaps made a mistake, and not just the mistake itself, but something that you learned from it that allowed you to keep moving forward, so that our people, cannot fall into those same traps?
I think for me, it's more about a behavior, which was that I really spent a lot of time in the early part of my career working hard and not working smart. And I think part of that is being the proud daughter of Indian immigrant parents, and my father just sort of instilling in us, you work hard and continue to work hard and work hard some more, and you will be recognized. And that's not the case, right, in many of our organizations, because we know there's systemic bias. We know that it's hard, right? And so thinking about, for me, I always was like trying to get the A+ at work. There is no A+ and extra credit, right? So really thinking about, like, one of my big lessons would be like, you're my boss and you would assign me something. And I would just get into it and spend hours and hours and like perfecting this and perfecting that without just stopping to say, okay, what is it that you asked me to do? Let me just think before I start opening up, a document and start working on stuff or pulling data and wasting time and pulling the wrong data. Like, just on a blank piece of paper, what's the problem that needs to be solved and how can I go about it? And I found that way I saved a lot of hours. And also progress is progress. It doesn't have to be perfection. And so that's something that I constantly tell myself about, and also think about, a quick tip is setting timers when you're working on things. If I was going to send a note to my CEO, Andrew, I might belabor over that note for 2 hours. Did I pick the right sentence? Wait, is that spelled wrong? Is this the grammar? When he's just going to pick, or they will pick up their iPhone, look at it and hit yes or no. And so something I coach my team on now is if you're working on something important, you've also got to set a timer because we have to move on and go to the next thing.
In your, personal life, what maybe is one habit that you've developed, a life habit, if you will, that, keeps you being your best and empowers you to be your best?
Writing has been my therapy and continues to be. I love writing and I enjoy writing and storytelling and also sharing my perspective on diversity, equity, inclusion, and also leadership. For some people, that might be painting, running. I used to run, not anymore in this pandemic, but everybody has something and you just need to hold on to that. And for me, I find it very therapeutic when I can share, and some of the things I share publicly and some of them I don't, but you find something that you really enjoy and that you can have that be something that's for yourself. That's a great question. I think LinkedIn's a great place to start. Before I started getting published in Entrepreneur and Harvard Business Review, those things certainly didn't happen overnight, but I would just be writing my thoughts on LinkedIn on posts and then also just on blog format. And in the beginning, when I was nervous, I would share it with like my close group of friends and say like, what do you think? And they would be encouraging and or say like, hey, that ended on a little negative note. Can we make that a little more positive? And all feedback is good feedback. So I took what I needed and worked on it. And then I have a column, Sway. So there's many platforms, like you can sign up for Sway, which really is about elevating women's voices, and you can write there. Lots of great places. It just, I think, takes some time to think about what you want to share and what you want to write about, and then take some time to think about where are the spaces and places that individuals might be interested in.
That was Mentor Momentum, sharing life and business lessons from incredible leaders. Looking for more momentum? Subscribe to our weekly Momentum newsletter at nextgenhq.com and check out our other podcast, Momentum Audio, on any of your favorite podcast channels. Now that's momentum.